Well, Chainsaw Man has finally ended and people are mad. I see people saying that it's one of the worst endings of all time, but some of you probably haven't even been keeping up with the series and don't really know how it ended or why people are so mad about it. I wanted to go through like a brief overview as well as like giving my own thoughts on it, getting into the nitty-gritty of what is wrong with the ending. First of all, let me say part 2 has been an absolute roller coaster when it comes to Chainsaw Man. For most of it, it seems like a lot of people couldn't exactly predict where it was heading. It was all over the place. And I'm sure that absolutely nobody predicted that it would end in this particular way. After it seems like Denji is finally going to get to have sex with Asa, he ends up getting eaten by some sort of bug devil, because now there are swarms of bugs taking over the earth. And while he's eaten, he's not like completely dead per se. He's more so like in this inner world and talking to Pochita. And obviously he's upset. He's like, oh man, I was just about to have sex. This sucks. What are we gonna do, Pochita? And he reaches the conclusion that it's better that Denji didn't get to have sex with Asa because he wasn't happy in that world, and he doesn't believe that he could be happy if he's just simply getting all the things that he wants. But rather instead, he would be much happier off just staying away from a distance and dreaming of having those things without actually having them. Pochita actually ends up making this own self-sacrifice of eating his own heart in order to remove Chainsaw Man from existence, which affects the timeline now and undoes all of the events that happened throughout the entire Chainsaw Man series. Rather instead, like, rewrites this new universe in which Denji is now alongside with Power, who was hinted at returning eventually in part 2. Yes, she does return, all the way at the last chapter. But yes, now he is working with Power as a devil hunter again without being Chainsaw Man, and the control devil that they're both working for is not the part 1 Makima control devil, but rather it is instead Nayuta, who was his friend in part 2. He even runs into Asa again, and that iconic scene where she accidentally kills the chicken devil, he saves her from that timeline. And I guess we can assume that that fixes Asa's life as well, if we just ignore all that other stuff that happened with the teacher and the student. But we can assume that this timeline is like significantly different from the original. And this is a timeline where Denji is at his happiest. Even though he's not fucking anybody, even though he's still like working as a devil hunter and he's not getting to go to school or live a normal life, we get the impression that he is genuinely happier and that this is the better life for him. Same thing with Asa, of course. And in that sense, you get the feeling that, okay, well, Chainsaw Man actually has a happy ending, I guess. Maybe a little bit bittersweet, but overall, the happiest ending that these characters could get. All that being said, it is understandable why people do not like this ending at all. In general, people typically don't like endings where they just undo all the events of the entire series because it feels like there was no point in reading it. It's like, well, why even bother going through this entire story when I could have just read the very last chapter as a short story? And I don't think that that immediately makes it a bad ending, because there are other manga series that do this and do it well. Like, for example, other manga series that have time travel as a factor, you kind of read those series under the impression that yes, they're going to use time travel to undo all of the bad stuff. You know, that's the case with Summertime Rendering, which I think is a fantastic series, and that's sort of like the case with Future Diary as well, and I think those two do a much better job with doing an ending similar to that. Not only because of how they execute it, but because you're also kind of expecting it. It's kind of going in that direction. With Chainsaw Man, it feels like it comes out of nowhere. And that also makes you ask, like, a few different questions of how exactly Chainsaw Man eating devils really works, which is always kind of something that's made a lot of people scratch their heads while reading this series, because in part 1 it was just a simple, okay, Chainsaw Man needs to eat the devil in order to kill Makima, right? Eventually there will be another control devil, but for this specific one, you have to eat her in order to kill her. Eventually we got introduced to the concept of Chainsaw Man erasing things entirely from existence, obviously with like eating the ears or eating the legs, and that would erase those things from existing. And it would even like mess with people's memories. They would forget that those things ever existed. But it didn't change the timeline. It didn't completely change any of the timeline events. They just popped out of existence all of a sudden and people forgot about them. Pochita eating himself to get rid of Chainsaw Man actually created a butterfly effect where everything changed. And it's not even like chainsaws stopped existing or anything. That chainsaw did not pop out of existence by any means, but rather instead just that specific devil's existence disappeared. The whole timeline shifted. And there's just nothing that was building up to that even being a possibility. You could argue maybe that's because Fujimoto wanted it to be a big surprise that could happen. But I think more likely he probably just didn't know how he was going to end the series. That's the impression I was getting anyway, because like I said, part 2, I was just starting to feel completely drained on part 2. And it was a roller coaster, I'll give it that. Whoa, what's going to happen next? But I was starting to feel drained, and by the time we introduced an ending coming, I was like, oh, okay, finally, there's going to be a conclusion. How are they going to conclude it in only 2 more chapters? And I guess this is how. Now, contrary to the crowd, I will be one of the first to say I don't really hate the ending. Even though I recognize, yes, there are problems with it, yes, it does feel like the entire series was not really worth reading to get to that kind of ending, I do kind of appreciate that the author wanted to have a happy ending, even if it was more of a bittersweet happy ending. I think for most of the series, he just made it very hard on himself to get to that point. And maybe if he had actually planned ahead, which I suspect he didn't do, maybe he could have given people more preparation to receiving that kind of ending. The idea of Denji just not being the type of person who can handle actually getting the things that he wants, and rather instead he'd be much happier just dreaming of those things. That is interesting, right? Because throughout most of the series, one of the most frustrating things about the Chainsaw Man series is that we don't see much growth in Denji. He's kind of always the same character, and he's kind of always a little bit annoying, a little bit complainy, very horny. Denji's happier, Asa's happier, Power gets to be alive, Nayuta is taking over as the control devil now. All things considered, it could be much worse. At least there is a little bit of fan service at the end. And I'm not just talking about the titties. Delivering on some of the things that some of the fans wanted, such as Power returning and Denji getting a happy ending, even if it's not like the happiest of happy endings. He is much happier now in this new timeline. But that's really all the thoughts I have on the Chainsaw Man ending. Like I said, I don't hate it. It's definitely not as much as everybody else hates it anyway. But I do see the problems with it. I understand why people don't like it. And to each their own at the end of the day. I would prefer an ending that is happy and also makes sense. I think that's what most mangaka should aim towards, but I'll accept an ending that's happy and doesn't make any sense at all. At the end of the day, Chainsaw Man is over, and now I can already sense that these manga publishers are on the hunt for what's going to be the new Chainsaw Man, what's going to be the new edgy IP that takes over. And maybe if you're upset with the Chainsaw Man ending, maybe you'll have a new series series soon that'll fill that void in your heart. But until then, make sure you check out burningstarcomics.net for even more happy endings. We got our own independently published comic books on there. We also have some sweet merch, posters, original art. You're not gonna want to miss the stuff from burningstarcomics.net. But until next time, guys, I'll leave it here. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!
Program restart.